seem real, you're not here. Visions of you slowly vanish. Time stands so static. I can feel all the pain left us here with misery was not our last wish.
To say the last 3 or 4 months have been interesting would be something of an understatement, to be honest with you. Carrying on exactly the moment that we finished filming on the last vlog, I knew then that I had a brain tumour. I'd had loads and loads of indications that something was wrong for about 3 or 4 years, and as a typical bloke, I did absolutely nothing about it. Until, of course, I started going blind in my left eye. I went to see a specialist at Frimley Park Hospital, and eventually he took an MRI scan. He thought I'd had somewhere between 10 and 15 strokes, very, very small strokes, and that's why I was going blind. It wasn't until he took the MRI scan and looked at it that he gave me a call. He didn't want me to make an appointment. He wanted me to go and see him the following morning, which Lynn and I did, and we sat down in his office and he told me I had a brain tumour. And the way that he described it, bearing in mind, of course, he's not a brain surgeon, was it was some kind of little pimple on my brain. I was quite convinced they were going to drill a hole just above my left eye, take it out, stitch it up, and I'd be fishing the following week. The story, unfortunately, turned out to be totally and utterly different to that. The following week, 4 days after we'd finished filming, I was at Tooting, St George's Hospital, talking to Mr Stapleton. In the next 5 minutes, things were uncovered. I was kind of cool about the whole thing, to be honest with you. And at one point, he asked me if I was that concerned. And like I told him, I'm a carp angler, and anything he needed to know about carp angling, I would tell him. He was the brain surgeon, and he was going to be the one that was going to have to put his thing down and rectify whatever problem it was, and I was just about to find out how big that was. He asked me on a scale of 1 to 10 how urgent I thought it was, and I said maybe a 4 to 5. And he looked me straight in the eye and said, the urgency level's about 20 on that scale. He said, I'm going to fill you up with steroids over the next 2 weeks to try and get some of the swelling of the brain down so that I can operate within a fortnight. He said, it's that urgent, I need to do it now. It was the size and a half of a tennis ball, down that side of the brain there and then underneath it. And there were various things they had to do to take it out. The immediate plan was they'd remove 3/4 of the brain, of the tumour. I was amazed they actually found a brain, to be honest with you, but there you go. They were planning on removing 3/4 of the tumour because there were 2 veins growing through the tumour itself. Remember, this thing had been growing in my brain for 10 years, possibly 5 millimetres a year it was growing. So you can imagine how massive it was and how much of an area it had taken up. That last quarter of it would be removed by radiotherapy a month or so after I'd had the operation. And again, things turned out very, very differently to what they expected. The risks were astronomical, but as I said to him at the first meeting, he was the brain surgeon and all my trust was in him. On the 9th of August, I was taken into hospital and all the pre-op stuff started. It was a hell of a moment for as much for my wife Lynn as it was for me. I've been this ex-paratrooper guy who's tried to be hard as nails all of his life, and nothing ever really went wrong. I'd broken 32 bones in my body over those years, but I recovered from them so quickly. Things were just about to be a whole lot different, but with Lynn's strength and my stubbornness, we were just about to take it head on. I didn't probably wake up properly for 3 days, to be honest with you. There's nothing I can really remember about it. I was in the intensive care unit. They were caring for me, and it wasn't really until day 5 that I sort of started to understand what had happened. It was the longest operation he'd done, 14 hours, and evidently, because I was so stable on the table, they were able to remove the whole of the tumour. They were able to cut all the way around those veins without causing any damage, and the risk was astronomical, but inadvertently I'd helped them by staying so still. Trying to get back to normality was so frustrating. I couldn't speak to begin with. I couldn't think straight. A lot of people sent me text, so many of them from within the trade. So many people got this concept that we all hate each other because we work for different companies. Nothing could be further from the truth, and a lot of genuine messages came from guys all over the carp fishing trade. I can't tell you word for word the messages I tried to send back to them, but none of them made any sense. Most of them have been kept by these people to show people how ridiculous they were, and I must admit I still laugh about them today. But things started to come together, and my stubbornness, went to new levels on day 6 when I decided not to take my pills. They argued the point with me, and in the morning, after I'd had a bit of a bad night's sleep because I hadn't taken the pills, I went and tried to make myself a cup of tea out in the corridor and had a massive seizure out there. It took loads of them to get me back into bed, and it was some 6 hours later when I had enough brain power to decide that I needed to do everything they told me but to the letter, and I have done so ever since. Fishing was something that at certain points, that I won't necessarily go into detail at this now, I never ever thought I would do again. And to go fishing, I feel emotional about it now. I can feel myself welling up a little bit. It was such an amazing thing when I started thinking about it, and when it started to become possible. So many people had helped me. Drew and Laura from Arborfield Cow City Livery, Luke and Charlotte, who run the dogs out at Sandhurst Military College, Adam Whittington and other guys had just been running Lynn to hospital, all that way, an hour and a half from home. Amazing people. But I've got a neighbour who lives up the road, Stuart Dawes, and he was just about to come charging to my assistance. And he is a carp angler, but he's such a genuine guy and wanted to get me out on the bank. And this is the lake that we eventually came to. It's called Shorefield Lakes. It's, believe it or not, about 750 yards from my house. 2 months after the operation, Stuart arrived one Saturday morning at 9:30 with his barrow.
This is husband getting ready for his first fishing trip.
It's my first fishing trip in 3 months. And thankfully, Stu Dawes has loaded. I'm only going for a couple of hours. He's got my rods on there, and he's brought the bait and everything else, and hopefully I'm going to go and catch a carp.
Enjoy, lads.
But this is the thing about carp fishing. It's not always about catching a carp. It's actually being there, and in these circumstances, I am the happiest man alive. So, here goes nothing. I may be sometime.
Thanks, Stu.
That's right, Lynn.
Enjoy yourself.
We will, I'm sure we will.
I had a walking stick at the time, and the last thing I ever want to do is use things where it advertises the fact that I'm ill. I've thrown that in the bin now. Hopefully I'll never see it. It will never see the light of day ever again. And we got to the lake. To be honest with you, that was all that really mattered. That I was a lake. I was in that environment. I watched the birds. The kingfisher got breezed past in front of me probably half a dozen times. There was so much life around the lake, and it just assured me that's half the reason that I actually go fishing, is just to spend my time in that environment. It was absolutely wonderful to be here. And then there was a problem. I was blind totally at that point in my left eye. I had other problems, of course, my stability, my speech, my memory. It was all still affected at that point, and still is to this day, believe it or not. It took me 6 or 7 casts to get a bait off the end of this little bush at 30 yards. I lost the leads, obviously lost the PVA bags I was putting on the rigs, and it was all a little frustrating. And I must admit, at that point, I thought there is absolutely no way I'm ever going to catch a carp on this trip. I baited up both spots with a couple of pages of 10mm, 15mm boilies, hybrid, my favourite bait ever. Unbelievably, I'd got my camera out after about 25 minutes and I was just setting it up on a tripod, wanted to get some photos and a little bit of footage of me on the lake when one of the rods absolutely ripped off. I've had some emotional moments in my life through my military service, through the things that have happened to my wife over the last 25 years, with the cancer and the strokes and the loss of eyesight on her part. But it isn't very often that I get that emotional. I was doing something at that point that I never ever thought I would do again, as I suggested earlier on, and the tears welled up in my eyes. I'm not frightened or ashamed to admit that. That is what carp fishing means to me. But when that 15-pound common rolled into my net, I cannot even begin to tell you how emotional it was.
How unbelievable. I left my house this morning just pleased that I was leaving my house. And I can't, quite emotional really, to been as close to spinning off my mortal coil as I was. To still be able to come out and catch carp like that. Doesn't matter how big it is, doesn't matter what flavour it is, it's the joy that they bring, and more power to his fins. He's about 15 pound. I'm not going to weigh him, I don't think there's any need at all. It's what he represents is so important to me. Carp fishing on the most stunning lake, some of the oldest carp swimming around, absolutely fantastic.
And as a carp angler, I felt reborn. I felt my life had been just rebooted all over again. And to be honest with you, that's where my life started again. And it's getting better all the time. I must admit, at that stage, I was starting to feel poorly. And my head was absolutely thumping, and I felt remarkably sick. It was amazing. But we were there for 4 hours, and I was quite intent on using up all the time we had there. And unbelievably, 3 hours and 55 minutes into those 4 hours, I got my bite. And to play in a lively little mirror, I don't know what it weighed, probably 12, 13 pound maximum. Again, it didn't matter. Carp fishing so much to me, not about catching big fish. It's about the enjoyment that it gives me, and it just doesn't get any better than that. But with Stuart's help, again, we packed everything away, and I limped rather weakly away using my stick from the lake. But again, I have to be honest with you, all I could think about at that moment in time was getting out and doing a night's fishing. So by the time I got home, I decided a night was inevitable, and I spoke to my mate Stuart about it. He was keen as mustard to help me to do that. Lynn, on the other hand, wasn't so keen, and in no way, shape or form do I blame her. And the next 3 days after that 4-hour session, I practically spent in bed feeling very, very poorly. To me, that was the price I had to pay, and I didn't care. I didn't care how bad I felt because I'd enjoyed it so much, and I knew a night would fill me with even more joy, to be honest with you. So Stuart and I, with Lynn's guidance, started to make plans. There were signs and symptoms that Stuart needed to know about if he needed to act on it to get me away. Stuart's girlfriend, Cody, was put on standby to come and pick me up from the lake if I needed it. But 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after that Saturday of the 4-hour session, Stuart got to my house again.
Oh, sir, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be bending like that.
Well, I'm not going to ask you to do my boot places.
Have you got your blood pressure monitor?
Yes, I've got that. It's all packed in there.
No, it isn't. I can see it.
Actually,
Oh.
well, to be honest, no, I haven't got it.
Good timing, Stuart.
Anything
Very good
that
timing.
I have to do with hospitals is going to be left at home, and that's the end of it. I'm just going to go out and check the rain, and then I'm going to be on my way, Linny. Just take care. First, this is my first night in 3 months, so I don't care if I don't catch a carp. I just want to spend 24 hours on the bank.
If you feel poorly, you're coming home. Okay?
Okay, if I feel bad, I should be on my way.
Yeah, that's fine, mate.
Okay.
That's fine. Absolutely fine.
Anything for a cuddle.
All right,
I love you.
I love you, Linny. Take care. See you soon.
There's several areas on this lake. Stuart's quite an expert on it. He's been fishing here for a few years. I've only done a handful of sessions on here over the years. We decided on one area. Carp, in the main, will tell you everything you need to know about how to fish for them, where to fish for them. And these were no different. After about 5 or 10 minutes, 2 great big sheets of white bubbles came up. One over a silty area that I found out with a bare lead a little while later, and one over a very weedy area. And eventually that activity died down, which gave me an opportunity to investigate the area with a bare lead. I didn't want to make too many casts, of course, and kept things to a minimum. But I found the silty area, and just to the left of it, I found a small bar, and behind it, in about 5 foot of water, was a little gravel patch. They looked like 2 ideal places to me. I put them out. Same old. My lead clip, 3-ounce flat pair leads, Cortex strippable hook link, a small curved hook, a dumbbell hook bait, tipped with a bit of plastic, and my PVA bag on top. That was the presentation. For me, it works everywhere, and this was no different. And again, I'd picked up my camera to put it on the tripod. This is 2 hours into my 24-hour session. And the rod on the sill absolutely ripped off. We're right at the start of my first 24-hour session for an inordinate amount of time. It seems like an absolute age. And really the icing on the cake. A mid-double common that is absolutely scale perfect. Its mouth looks like it's never been up before. What an incredible creature to start off my little session. A session I've looked forward to since I woke up for the operation, really, being honest with you. What a battle as well for such a small fish. It's an incredible, real honour, and as I've always said, it doesn't matter about the size of the fish you catch, it's the pleasure that they give you, and this little fella's going to make me smile for a very, very long time. I thought that was going to be it, to be honest with you. This lake, as I say, isn't easy. Once you catch 1 or 2 fish from one spot, you normally have to move and go and find them elsewhere if you want to get another. In saying that, 2 hours after that bite, that same rod was away again. A very similar size, common mid-double, maybe 15, 16 pound. I whooped and hollered just a little. We filmed it again. And I settled back down, and I really, really thought that would be the last of it. I must admit, at that point, my head started to thump. I started feeling weak. It just, everything didn't feel right. But I was determined. I'm stubborn and so pig-headed. I was so determined I was going to do this 24 hours of fishing. And I repositioned the rod. But this time, and people say that they want to change all of their presentation and everything because they're fishing over different surfaces, I put exactly the same rig into the weed. I'd seen a couple of patches of bubbles come up in that whilst we were preparing the fish for filming, and during the filming I'd seen patches of bubbles coming up in the weed, so I put that hook bait into the weed, and unbelievably an hour after that, that rod ripped off, and another probably identical common slipped into the net, identical weight anyway. After my third fish, I said to Stuart it would be after dark when those carp ventured onto the gravel, and that's when I'd get my nighttime bite. Unbelievably, darkness fell and it was about 7:45, and that gravel rod ripped into life, and probably the smallest fish I'd had so far rolled into the net. Again, it didn't matter about the size, it mattered I'd caught one after dark, and that was the whole point of this particular mission, this 24 hours on the bank. But when I put the fish back, I still had one rod in the water, and I really felt wrong. I can't think of any other word to describe it. I felt so ill, so dizzy, that I walked over to the rod and I reeled it in. To tell you I'd fished for those 24 hours would be a little bit of a fib, because I didn't recast that rod after an absolutely awesome night's sleep until 7 o'clock the next morning. And I woke up, I did feel a lot better, but I still felt awful, and I said to Stuart we probably need to go home in an hour or two's time. But sucker for punishment that I am, I recast both of those rods, one onto the gravel, one back into the weed, and we sat down and drank tea like you do early mornings in carp fishing, and started discussing everything about it all over again. When out the blue, that weed rod ripped into life, and from the off it felt like a slightly different fish, slightly bigger. It was a little bit more mundane, a bit more ploddy. In the scheme of things, it wasn't a massive fish. It weighed 17 pounds and 9 ounces. But again, I cannot tell you what that fish meant to me. And that's me coming to the end of my first overnight 24-hour session in a hell of a long time. And what a very special moment it was. I've had 5 fish, including this stunning old mirror. I have the most blinding headache. I feel sick, and to top it all, I feel completely and utterly shattered. But there's a smile on my face, and there will always be a smile on my face while I'm catching carp such as these. When I'll go again, I've got absolutely no idea, but I can assure you, when I do go, that smile will still be there, because carp fishing, as it always does, will light my fire. With Stuart's help, again, I packed up. His brother Cameron came down to push my barrow home, and I can't thank him enough for that. And I got home, and again, I had to retire to my bed for 3 whole days. The next thing I thought about was fishing for 2 nights. And to be honest with you, everybody said it, and I felt it deep down in my heart. That was going to be a session too far. But I'm driven by numerous things. In the main, to be out in the environment, and obviously somewhere down that line is catching a carp. But Stuart had put so much effort into me catching fish over those 2 sessions. He hadn't caught anything for himself, and I wanted to go to the lake he wanted to go to, simply so I could repay him for the fish that I'd caught, and he would catch a carp and I would film it and photograph it for him. Unfortunately, on the first night I knew it was game over. It was like somebody was stood on my head, hammering nails into my eyes. It was just awful. I felt sick, and I had to arrange to get picked up and taken home. The unfortunate side of having this wrong with me, amongst a whole host of other things, is the fact that legally I can't drive for 6 months. Whether I'll go fishing again this side of Christmas, I'm not quite sure. I don't think I need to be putting myself through that anymore. 750 yards from my house, reckon I can come down here and do a bit of fishing in the days. Not loads of them, I don't want to do too much of it, but I do need to get my fix of fishing every now and again, because without it I think I'd be a lesser man, to be quite honest with you. But the whole experience for me has been the greatest experience of my life. Without the support of my friends, I wouldn't get anywhere. Ultimately, without the support, help and love of my wife, I would never have got anywhere. And it's thanks to all those people at Fox, at Mainline, and various people within the magazine industry that have helped me to get where I am today. And again, just to talk about those people fills me with a little bit of emotion, and I hope it stays that way forever, because it's been a hell of a ride.
Cool.
I was getting all dewy again. It's hard work saying that. Oof, excuse me. Oh my God, incredible. That was good.